Tiggy Legberg, as you know, was a major part of William and Harry's life when they were growing up, particularly after the then Prince Charles and Diana separated and divorced. She was sort of that female consistent presence in their life, that when they were staying with their father, and particularly after their mother died, well, then her role became more amplified as that warm sort of female, reliable person in their life. Now, we all know now that Martin Bashir actually manipulated Diana into that Panorama interview. And it's really interesting because it is related to what I'm going to share with you in this video with Tiggy Legberg. Now, that Panorama interview was in 1995. And the bit I'm going to tell you about in this video is actually Diana getting really cross about Tiggy in 1997, and actually only a few months before Diana died. So it's in Piers Morgan's Insider book. And when I first read the book, I didn't sort of think much about it. And then I just happened to see an article, an old article in the Times, about the fact that Tiggy Legberg had actually been compensated by the BBC because of that interview. Because in order to get the interview, Martin Bashir actually showed Diana false documents. And in those false documents, it was supposedly proof that Tiggy Legberg had actually had an affair with the then Prince Charles, that she'd got pregnant and actually had an abortion. So Diana, from that point, was thinking that Camilla Parker Bowles was just actually, someone to cover up the fact that her ex-husband was actually having a serious affair with the nanny. And of course she wasn't. She wasn't at all. And her life was affected by it. Prince Charles's life was affected by it. Diana was horribly hurt by it. And the fallout from it actually hurt Prince William and Prince Harry. So in the Insider, there's actually a bit of a lighter scandal because William, for reasons only known to him, actually invited Tiggy to his open day at Eton rather than his parents. And Piers Morgan actually talks about it in his book. Extraordinary scenes down at Eton today, Piers Morgan says in his journal, where William invited his nanny Tiggy Legberg rather than his parents to the annual open day. Tiggy, game as ever, was soon pictured smoking and guzzling champagne next to Will's, images that sent his already rather annoyed mother off the dial. Now, then he talks about the fact that he gets a call from Michael Gibbons, who is in Diana's office, and said to Piers Morgan that he had some thoughts from the princess. But the funny thing is, Piers Morgan heard Diana in the background, and he heard her telling Michael Gibbons what to say. He says, because he's listening to what the princess is saying and he's got Piers on the other end. The princess feels deeply hurt and angry that Ms. Legberg would behave this way when she's with William, and there are cameras around. It is idiotic behaviour and clearly shows that she is a bad influence on the boys, as the princess has been privately fearing for some time. So now Piers Morgan feels, free to create a headline, and they actually did a headline in the Mirror called Silly Glass, which is sort of a silly headline, but anyway. And then they do, the opinion of Diana. The only trouble is, now this is just conjecture from Piers Morgan, but he says that he thinks William might have got angry at his mum for going after Tiggy and then it turning up in the paper, which I'm sure would have really embarrassed him when it turned up in the paper. And so then the next day, Diana's retracting her statement, but she's going to the Sun and the Daily Mail and she's saying, I never said that. I never authorised my man in my office to say those disgusting things about Miss Legberg. So Piers Morgan rings up Michael Gibbons and he says, I rang him outraged, but I was told he would no longer be taking calls from the press. Unbelievable. She's not only dropped him right in it, she's banned him from defending himself. Michael's far too loyal and decent to return the favour, but he must be bitterly hurt inside. Later on that night, I finally got to speak to him on his mobile and he sounded petrified of saying anything. "This is all bullshit, Michael. Don't let her get away with this." But he just replied sadly, "Piers, you know what the princess can be like. You remember that stuff with the clinic. It'll blow over. It always does." That was referring to another story at the Priory Clinic. So there's this poor Michael Gibbons taking the fall. She's sounded off against Tiggy Legberg. And actually, I don't blame Diana, because if I was in a separated marriage situation and my young teenager was at Eton and then pictured in the paper guzzling champagne with the nanny who was smoking and guzzling champagne, well, I don't think I'd go to the newspaper necessarily, but who knows? I mean, and of course, don't forget what Diana was told by Martin Bashir only 2 years prior to that. So isn't it destructive when people lie and manipulate to get TV interviews? Because if she hadn't have been misled over Tiggy, she wouldn't have reacted so harshly at this point. And the tragedy of it is that if William did have a fight with Diana over this, and it strained relationships between her and her boy's nanny even more, how unfortunate, because within a couple of months, she had the accident and she wasn't around anymore. And so she went through all this awful time and angst and worry and concern, and so did everyone else in the family, and so did Tiggy, and it was all for nothing, and it was all made up, and it was just all manipulated to get a story. I hope you found that interesting, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.